Perhaps you've heard or read these lines on some kind of forum for a particular game at some time. It's a beta, we're just testers. It'll be fixed later. It's early access, it will change, give them time. Complaining about it won't help, be patient. By now, we have all heard or seen these phrases and more, uttered by developers, community managers, and the players or consumers in defense of their product. The term early access and beta have morphed from titling a particular stage of a game's development to now meaning a get-out-of-jail-free card, an excuse for poor ongoing product quality and decisions that has very deviously been weaponized to turn players into unwitting vanguards against any criticism towards the process and the game, enabling the continuation of more bad development practices. These players-turned vanguards will defend the products to the very end, often shooting down any detractors by reminding them that they willingly signed up to be a part of the testing phase, and I say that with air quotes. So complaining and criticizing this testing phase is redundant and wasteful. It's a logical argument, I will give them that, but the argument falls apart upon inspection of the game-making standards of today when compared to decades ago, which has seen a very obvious stagnation or decline in quality and stability. After all, we can only complain about things when we have the ability to compare. We can only perceive what is bad by being able to perceive what is good. To be able to judge something of higher quality, we must have an idea of what is lower quality. And I'm personally perceiving that the quality of games in general are getting worse. In spite of the many open and closed betas players are given the privilege to participate in. And that's another point as well. Marketing entities have very maliciously twisted the once serious and fully paid job of quality control and testing into a volunteer program that is to be considered a privilege to be a part of. Or, better yet, one that you must pay to be a part of. That's right, you, Mr. and Miss Average Gamer, who participates not with the mind of repetitiously and laboriously testing every aspect of the game that you can, and providing bug reports whenever possible, much as a traditional paid tester would have to do, but because you just want to experience the game earlier than everyone else, as a regular player. You're looking for personal enjoyment. I highly doubt you're spending every moment considering how each part of the experience will be received by the target audience and the future implications of that. Nor are you likely concerned with the developer's intended vision for how the game is supposed to play out, and providing feedback of your experience based upon whether that vision has been met. No, of course you're not. So very few of you are, if any. Why on earth would you place such a deliberate burden on yourself, during your limited leisure time, no less? A burden which you have probably paid to be a part of in many cases. No, you don't care to properly test. You just want to have a go on the game early. You want to be one of the first players. You want a new game to sink your teeth into, and you gladly lower your expectations and your standards to the bottom of the ocean, so that they don't get in the way of your quest to fulfill these desires. After all, in our societies, very logically and reasonably, we make the decision to give extra personal resources and time or pay a premium for something with the mind that we will see a positive result on our lives, not to add more burden. Perhaps you may have forgotten this, but a professional game tester of yesteryear got paid for doing this job, you know? They were paid for bearing the responsibility of having the quality of our experience rest upon their shoulders, back when standards and expectations were higher. Now, it rests upon our shoulders, for the most part, and look at the results. Games are more unstable, buggy, increasingly exploitative, and as developers and publishers alike see players clamoring for the chance to test a game before it's finished, wide-eyed and arms stretched up as high as they can, like a pupil in class desperately hoping the teacher will pick them, and then even showing they're willing to pay plenty of money to be picked. How do you think that looks in the eyes of these companies? Well, allow me to tell you. Suddenly they realize how pathetic and manipulatable their modern consumers are. How, to these consumers or players, quality now comes a far second to just being able to play the game no matter what. And better yet, they'll even pay for the chance. And, on top of this, will act as both tireless PR within the community, while actively defending the game against criticism, so long as they're petted frequently enough to keep their tails wagging. And there you go. QA testing goes out of the window as part of the core development cycle, or it's kept to a bare minimum. The players' seemingly endless goodwill, patience, and gullibility are leveraged for both income and free PR on a constant basis. Go on to any beta forum now and you'll find patch notes and developer update posts being flooded with players thanking them for updating the game and fixing bugs, as if said developers had gone out of the way to do this of their own goodwill and are not actually still actively developing the game. Think about this for a moment. You have players regularly and actively thanking developers for patching a game during an incomplete testing phase, specifically for finding and eliminating bugs. That alone speaks volumes of the players' intentions and desires for even joining the testing phase. It is very sad and weak of us, isn't it, that we can love a medium so much to compromise our standards as consumers to this degree. This perverse behavior is no accident, though, as despite a game supposedly still being actively developed and in the testing phase, developers and publishers will still treat the players as if, shockingly, they are only regular players and not actual, official, real testers. They demonstrate this behavior by remaining vague and uncommunicative with them, as is typical towards a normal fan base after a game's full release, usually only teasing morsels of information for everyone to speculate on, in a very clear attempt to build hype for what's to come. And they deliver every major new update with the same fanfare a completed game would with its post-release DLC or expansion. I mean, come on. If this was taken seriously as a testing phase, then this vague, emotionally provoking behavior towards the testers is completely counterproductive to that goal. Where, instead, if it were an actual serious testing phase, then things should be or would be as transparent, fast, and efficient in delivery as possible in order to get the bloody game made and released. And I haven't even touched upon how these companies will also gradually and subtly change the meaning of words, such as beta, to further absolve themselves of more responsibility and continue to gradually, subtly lower player expectations. And we, as players, dutifully lap it up, unquestioning. When examining this behavior from more rational eyes, it becomes quite clear then that these testing phases for the most part are just a farce. It's no big secret, but it is something that we need to remind ourselves of. It's another form of marketing or exploitation, or even a means of generating revenue earlier, selling the product before it's ready to even be sold. Oh, and I want to give a super special shout out to those companies who charge full retail price and beyond for a half-finished, bugged mess of a game, or even better, those who have the gall to release expansions or DLC for a game still supposedly in early access development. A few particular games come to mind which will remain unnamed for now. Or those many games, mainstream and not, who just give up halfway through development and release the game half-broken anyway. You know who you are. This perhaps sounds like an obvious thing to say, but it still needs to be said. Both developers and especially players should be utterly ashamed for allowing this behavior to even exist. If you're one of those people who regularly jump to the defense of a game in light of any criticism, armed with your trusty keyboard and ready to spew forth your infallible retort of undeniable fact as to the current status of the game being in testing, itching to strike down the unappreciative, blasphemous heathen, Then before you jump in with your emotionally heightened response, do keep in mind the famous saying, "Give them an inch and they'll take a mile." This saying not only speaks of potential exploitation in the now, it more vitally highlights the damning future implications of enabling this behavior. With every excuse, every defense you offer today in the face of the objectively ever-lessening quality, stability, and condition of games as a whole, and the increasing degree of exploitation they engage in, every hollow promise you trust unquestioningly, every justification you provide for yet another title stuck in permanent development limbo, you must realize you are inadvertently condemning the quality of the industry and its future players to be flushed further and further down the toilet. By being so forgiving, so lenient, so willing to lower your standards, all the while berating those who dare to hold higher standards as things used to be, and by irrationally denying and ignoring clear cases of deception and ineptitude by developers and publishers, you are, despite your goodwill, gradually deforming the very medium you set out to defend. And if all that has been said here fails to reach you so far, and you're still willing to prostitute yourself out for your game company of choice, and do battle against any naysayers, then my final attempt at making you see what, I'm sorry to say, what an absolute toxic puppet you are, is to have you ask yourself the following questions before you jump to the defense of your game. How many bug reports have you submitted in service of your apparently beloved game in development? How many times have you tested the game outside of wanting to play for your own personal fulfillment? My guess is not very many times at all. So please, consider your hypocrisy before you attack the next well-reasoned critic, and really think hard about who is actually the true saboteur of the game and its potential in the long term.